Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage America's Warrior Partnerships Board Member, General David Fridovich.
Can you do me a favor, all of us a favor? Oh, you took the picture down. Good, thank you. That's Lorraine's laugh. Don't do that again. Hey, we have a real treat this afternoon during lunch, and it's my opportunity, my pleasure, and my honor to introduce the Telling Project. I spent about the last 15 or 20 minutes speaking with Jonathan Way, the founder and the creator, and then also Max Raynard. He's the senior writer and executive producer. We've got 3 soldiers that are here. They're going to perform for you shortly. And what the Telling Project does, I'm obviously not reading notes that were so ably appointed to me. My apologies, Lori, you can have them back. But I'll probably need them. I'll probably need them later on. But the Telling Project has won 2 tellies, and I found out what that was, and you can ask Jonathan and Max later on what it is. But it's mostly from, I think, public service television. It's the 3rd tier awards, but unique to documentaries and, again, public television. They've won 2 of those already. The concept behind the Telling Project is that this allows soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine to tell their story to communities. And by doing that, growing that connective tissue between the experiences and the skills that these men and women have had, and educating and sharing those stories with the population of the communities. It's very powerful. They have an online presence. You can take a look at some or many of their productions throughout the United States. And I think we're very, very fortunate today to have them with us here. And they're going to perform for you shortly. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan and Max to the stage to tell you a little bit more about the Telling Project.
Well, we're not actually going to tell you a whole lot because we're not here. We're not who you are here to see. I would like to say thank you to the Marcus Foundation. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for bringing us here today. This has been a real privilege to be working here this week with these 3 amazing people. And General, you're hired as our PR guy. If you got the time, we could probably pay you in napkins or coasters or something like that. But at any rate, like I said, we're not who you're here to hear. We're not who you're here to see. It's these folks. So without further ado, what I would ask is, obviously, we all have to remain connected to a certain degree. If you can silence your cell phones, you can leave them on vibrate. That would be wonderful to mitigate any interruptions we might have during the performance. And now, without further ado, Telling AWP. Thank you.
Are you guys ready? Are you ready? All right. Good. I joined the Army in 1979. My intention was just to go in for 4 years, get the GI Bill, finish my education. I had a problem that I needed to resolve, and that was paying for college. And this was the way that I chose to resolve it.
I decided to move to Georgia to go to college. I learned fairly quickly that out-of-state tuition is extremely expensive. I was a homeless college student for a short period of time. The military had caught my attention because the recruiter was like, you can get paid and you can go to school. I decided to finish school that year, and I joined the military May 11, 2011.
So I grew up in Indiana, and from a very young age, I read all these military history books, the Civil War and World War II, and all the famous girls went to a school called West Point. So I decided in the 3rd grade I was going to go to West Point too. So I did all the things I wanted. I joined the Boy Scouts and joined the track team and ran for class president. And I even in the 5th grade went to a West Point candidate luncheon tagging along with an athlete from the track team at my local high school. And they all laughed at me because I was a 5th grader. But I showed back up as a junior in high school, and they weren't laughing. And the only college I ended up applying to was West Point, because I'm kind of a stubborn idiot. But I ended up getting in, and that was in June of 2000.
Or stand. In 1979, when I got to basic training, it was at the very beginning when the Army was integrating men and women in the same basic training companies. This was a very new thing. They would take 3 platoons of men and just 1 platoon of women, because we were smaller in numbers. The drill sergeants, all of which were male, I didn't have any female drill sergeants, found this kind of a conundrum. They were confused a little bit, and they were trying to adjust things to make it right, to do things. It was hard for them to approach us sometimes. We were the first females that they had ever had. Basically, they were trying to build the plane and fly it at the same time. Stand.
They learned to fly by the time they got to me. I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic training. There was these people with these drill sergeant hats, and I was wondering which one was going to be the nice one. There's this one drill sergeant in particular that I remember. She had this very vicious look on her face, like she was getting ready to tear people apart. I was hoping I wouldn't end up in her platoon. I did. They lined us up to get us prepared to get sent to the company we were going to go to. And then they gave us 5 minutes to get upstairs and get our staff right dress. Of course, I'm sitting there thinking, there's no way we're going to do this in 5 minutes. We didn't. We did training drills for 2 hours. Drop, private. They would give us these specific uniforms to put on, and of course, we never got it right. On your back, private. They loved flutter kicks. For the first week, we did shower drills. I hated shower drills, but they came into handy later. Beat your face, private. That's just it. You're never going to get it right. You're never going to get it right. Garrett, I think they get the idea. You can get up now. Isn't that right, Garrett? You're never going to get it right.
Yeah. So it's just that you go from being this kind of free and easy, carefree high school kid to show up to this place where you can't do anything right. There's rules and regulations, and you get yelled at for really dumb things, and you just feel defeated all the time because you can't do anything right. And on that very first day, you show up to what's called reception day, our day. It's a simple task, but it's fairly difficult. You have to report to the cadet in the red sash.
New Cadet Covington, reporting to Cadet in red sash as ordered, sir.
New cadet says, step up to my line and report. You're standing on my line. Try it again.
Yes, sir. New Cadet Covington, reporting to Cadet in red sash as ordered, sir.
Where are you from, new cadet?
Wheaton, Illinois, sir.
You have Sesame Street in Wheaton, Illinois?
Yes, sir.
You know what a preposition is?
Yes, sir.
And why are you standing behind my line? Start over and try it again.
Yes, sir. New Cadet Covington, reporting to Cadet in red sash as ordered, sir.
You think you did that correctly?
I don't know, sir.
What are your 4 responses? Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir. Sir, I do not understand. You're untrainable. Go to the end of the line and try it again.
Yes, sir.
That's not really until about your junior or senior year do you realize that all this kind of dumb stuff, how many milks are on the table, what are their next 3 meals, you know, what are the next 4 football teams we're playing, that really there's a point to it, right? That details matter and that words have meaning and they should probably prepare for the next day. But by that time, you're already a junior or senior and you're yelling at plebes yourself.
As I look back, I think my basic training experience, being one of the first platoon of females to go through an integrated basic training, was quite beneficial to me. Most of my drill sergeants were senior NCOs, and they had served in the latter part of the Vietnam War. So they took their job pretty serious. They were training us to prepare to go to war. They were making soldiers out of us. And now that I look back on it, I'm thankful that they did.
I decided to be a medic because I knew if I decided to get out, I'd be able to find a job afterwards. Fort Hood, Texas was my first duty station. I went to 2 units. The second unit we weren't supposed to deploy. My brigade commander was very serious about getting his star, and he knew if he could get the entire brigade to deploy, he would get it. And so that summer came, and we were really, I was hoping to go home for my birthday, but I was like, well, we're not deploying. I'll go home for the holidays. We ended up going to JRTC as a brigade to prep the ones who were deploying. Halfway through JRTC, my team leader comes into our bay, and she sits us down, and she's like, I have news for you. I don't know if it'll be good news or bad news. And I'm thinking, oh, we're going to go home early. This is great news. No, she let us know that we're all deploying. And I was like, well, ain't this some shit? I would have went home for my birthday. So sure enough, I go home in October to spend some time with my family before we deploy. My family decides to do a mini Thanksgiving to almost make it seem like I was home for the holidays, since I wasn't going to be. Then the first stop on our way to deployment was Kyrgyzstan. We get there, and there was snow. I hate snow. I left the Midwest because I hate it so much. I mean, on TV it's very beautiful, but in person, I hate it. And then after that, we go to Bagram. Bagram is where my unit in processed at. The moment you get off the aircraft, you're handed a loaded magazine because you don't know what's going to happen. You're finally downrange. So after we left there, we landed in Zeohawk. That's where our COB was located. We were a blackout COB, so we didn't have lights at night, and we didn't have running water from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then if the generator went out, you didn't have any water at all. And so that's when the shower drills came in handy, because in the wintertime, cold water bottle showers kind of suck. So there was this one time I was wandering around. I was supposed to be doing something, not really certain what that something was. But one of the officers saw me wandering around trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. He goes, Covington. I'm like, hey, what's up, sir? He's like, come over to the Afghan Army side with me. And normally when I go off the COB, I try to make sure I have a scarf on because we are in their country, so I try to respect their norms. And he's like, don't worry about it. We're just going to go over there. So we get over to the Afghan Army side, and they're giving us this tour. And the Afghan chaplain is like kicking one of the other Afghan soldiers. And I was like, okay, that's cool. They kind of do those kind of things over here. All right. And then afterwards, they decided to introduce us to leadership over there. I walk up to the first guy, and I kind of give him my hand so that we can shake hands, because he's already shaken everyone else's hand. And he just looks at me. And I look back at him, and he looks at me. No handshake. I don't know if I was being stubborn or I just really wanted someone to shake my hand, so I attempted again. Guy just looks at me. I look at him. No handshake. I tried a third time. Same thing. He just looks at me, and I look at him, and then I realized I wasn't getting the handshake. And I was just like, oh, okay. It was still really beautiful there. I remember when we landed, we came in at night, so the only light we really had was our flashlights, but the sky was lit up with stars. I had never seen so many stars before.
So when you graduate, you get grad leave, and it's 2 months off, and that's the most time we've had off since we started. And 9/11 was our sophomore year, so we knew we were all going to war. So my best friend, Dave Frazier, and I decided we're going to go to Europe and kind of make the most of life before we go to Iraq. And I met Dave on our cross-country team. I got cut because he was faster eventually. But we would take our month's pay and spend it in one night on Bleecker Street in New York together. We had also had a lot of adventures in Highland Falls, but also, believe it or not, we taught Sunday school together, which is hard to believe. But we decided to do the running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain on a grad leave. So we go to San Fermin and the white linen shirts and the wineskins full of Rioja, and we met some folks from Australia, and we had a grand time, and we went back, and we even decided to go to Ranger School together, because who doesn't want to be a badass, you know? I ended up recycling and breaking my legs in Dahlonega. Dave graduated, but our 2 months off in the Gulag, we at least had each other to hang out with, which was pretty cool. But we got back. We decided to live in the same Army base together, right? Because he's my best friend. We chose Fort Hood, Texas, in Killeen, which is not really a thriving metropolis of a town. But we were going to Baghdad in a couple months, so there'd be a lot of school nights when I just look at Dave and I say, Thunder Run. He'd look back at me and say, Thunder Run. We got into his blue truck and drove down to Austin, and on a Wednesday, Thursday night, stay out till 6 o'clock in the morning, come home, shower, and go straight to PT. Because we knew we were going to have that chance for a while. So then we deployed. He was in a different unit. He was in 4th Brigade. I was in 1st. He was an engineer. I was a cavalry scout. So we kind of parted ways for a while, and I got to my unit, and I I'd never been in a unit, nor had I been in combat. I take over a scout platoon. We live in a place called, it's a burned out paper factory across from Baghdad Gardens. And it's during the surge in 2006. It's a rough time. It's IEDs every day, small arms contact every day and every night. We're doing high value target raids, kill capture missions, kicking down doors and throwing flashbangs, and guys are getting hurt, and it's pretty intense. But throughout all this, I had a company commander in the cavalry. It's a troop commander, a guy named Ian Weichel, who was like this mythological kind of leader, right? I mean, I've only met very few in my life, and he's one of these guys where the whole kind of unit just orbits around him. He's got charisma, and he was a third-year commander, almost a major, which is old for a guy in command, but he had been so good, and he had been in operation 2 years before they caught Saddam Hussein, so he was fairly famous. But he was my main mentor, and he invested a lot in me personally and professionally. He'd pull me aside and teach me the art of leadership and the art of land warfare, and spent a lot of time with me. And so he was my guy. And then there was one day, and he was coming from a key leader engagement at the intersection of Tampa and Vernon, and his vehicle was hit by an EFP, an explosively formed projectile that is a piece of copper that cuts through armor like knife through butter, and he was killed instantly. And so that kind of just destroyed the entire morale of the unit, right? This guy that we all, I don't want to say worship, but we looked up to a great deal, is gone. And yeah, it kind of sucked the life out of us for a while. You get 1 day off, you go to the memorial ceremony, salute the helmet and the dog tags on the rifle, and go back out the next day. So it was tough for me. It's hard to explain the kind of relationship, but he was kind of like a father and a brother at the same time. But it's you're in combat, so you keep operating, you keep rolling. We're back out the next day. We're kill capture, core 9 and searches, key leader engagements, tea and cheap cigarettes all over the place. And we got a call one day that we had identified an IED maker trained by the Russians up in Sunni Beach, which is this beautiful piece of real estate along the Tigris River where Saddam's old ministers used to live, Tariq Aziz and Baghdad Bob, and it's just beautiful homes, like granite and marble and just so opulent. And so we do the patrol brief, we go out, we find our guy. took 30 minutes. Kicked open the door, it was a good time. We're kicking open the door and kind of ransacking a Bathurst mansion, which is enjoyable, to be honest. Found our bad guy, and we're going back to the detailing operations center. Quick drive, probably 20 minutes back to the fob. And I remember, forget this, I looked at Sergeant James Ellis, Staff Sergeant Ellis. He's the team leader in the truck in front of me. I said, Sergeant Ellis, should we go back up Cobra or come back down Fordyce? Sergeant Ellis was a guy that about a week earlier, when we get 1 day in a week in this trailer where we can call home or use the internet. And I was in that trailer calling home, and I saw him crying on the phone. He was singing happy birthday to his 4-year-old daughter, just crying. It's kind of an unwritten rule, though. You don't talk about what you see in that trailer. Wives are breaking up with their husbands, and they find out they have drained bank accounts. It's kind of you don't talk about what you see in there. But anyway, Sergeant Ellis says, hey, sir, let's go back down Fordyce. We're just on it. It's clean. We're good. I'm like, all right, Sergeant Ellis, you're right. He gets in the front truck, Alpha 26. I get in behind him, and we go. About 4 minutes into driving back to the fob, there's this bone-jarring, kind of soul-crushing detonation. And his 6,000-pound 1151 Humvee is thrown about 100 yards off the side of the road. Small arms fire in 3 directions. We're a little jarred and dazed, so my guys are up and just on adrenaline are blasting the wood lines and 3 sides with 240s and 50 caliber Mark 19s. And so we get it suppressed, but we got to find our guys. So I get out and I find Sergeant Ellis. He's unconscious, but he's intact. He's good. I think he's got a shot. We get him on a stretcher, get him an LZ. Docs are working on him. I find Santos Armijo, good kid from Phoenix, gunner, arms off, but it's clean. I think he's got a shot. Then we establish the LZ, and I call up a 9 line to get the birds going. Line 1, this is Hooligan 1, Mike uniform, the whole deal, 10-digit grid. Then I look for the other 2 guys. Justin Jarrett was a kid from Blue Ridge Mountains in Georgia, and hilarious. Everybody loved him. And I'll never forget, ended up finding his leg, right? And from the hip down to his boot. The boot's still tied. Duct tape on, 100 mile tape with his blood type, and I just pick up his leg. It's fucking heavy, like heavier than I thought it should have been. And it was my job, my patrol, and I felt like it was my job to literally pick up the pieces. And so I did. Put them in the bag. Chris Walker, a kid from Illinois, same thing. He's not intact. But the birds come, they land, and we get the guys on the bird, and I'm the platoon leader. I'm not supposed to jump on the bird with them, but we got another section coming to secure the LZ, and I couldn't leave these guys. It's hard to describe it. It's like they're my brothers and my sons at the same time. So I get on the bird. We land at the Cache in Baghdad, a combat support hospital, and we touched down. And a combat support hospital, it's one of the best hospitals in the world in the middle of Baghdad. It'd be like going to Emory University over here, the best surgeons in the world. And they'd just been blown up, 30 minutes ago. Now we're at one of the best hospitals in the world. Gators pull up. These four-wheelers with flatbeds. We put the guys on the gators, and they roll straight in the operating room on the back of these gators, and they start to work on them. Best surgeons in the world. And I'm standing there. I don't know what to do, so I walk into the hospital. It's this beautiful atrium. I'm covered in their blood and my sweat and some of my own tears, and a lot of cordite from the small arms fire and IED. And I just kind of look around, and God bless them. The nurses and docs come up, and they're compassionate, and they have empathy, and they offer me coffee. And on the wall, there's this Little Debbie snack, like free stuff. And they asked me if I wanted a Twinkie. I just remember thinking, what world am I living in right now? And so they leave, and I kind of stand there, and this guy's doing his job. God bless him, good soldier. But he's behind a desk and says, "Sir, you got to clear your weapon. You can't have a loaded weapon in the hospital." So I should have gone outside and gone to the clearing barrel like a good leader, but I was a little salty, right? So I just stared at him and dropped the magazine and just pulled back the charging handle around, hit the floor, and I just left it there, and I went and sat down. Which is kind of a dick move, but I was feeling a little rough. So Doc comes out and says, "Garrett," or he says, "LT, come look at Ellis. He didn't make it. I need you to identify him." So I go see Sergeant Ellis one more time, just hold his tags there, and cry a little bit. Identify him. Army Hill didn't make it either. All four were killed in action. And so I just go back outside to the atrium and sit down and eat a Nutty Bar. And that was October. We were supposed to go home in December of that year.
Things that I remember that most resonate with me is when we were downrange, deployed. It was the bond that we all had. Garrett mentioned it too. It's complicated, but you relied on each other for your very lives. And these are people sometimes that you barely even know, and you put that trust and faith in them. It's like a brotherhood or a sisterhood, but I can't quite define it in those words. I can only say that it's a feeling that I don't have. It's different than I feel for other people. I ended up staying 27 years in the United States Army. My first combat experience was I was jumping into Grenada, 25 October 1983. Our target was the airport, and I remember as soon as my feet hit the tarmac, people were shooting at me, and I jettisoned my parachute, and a really large NCO ran in front of me, and I said, "I'm going with him." So I followed him, and he sat down. It took me a couple of minutes, I'll tell you, but I got my mojo back, started returning fire. Right after Grenada, it wasn't long, and we found ourselves in Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua. 1989, it was Panama. We ousted Noriega. Not even a year later, Desert Storm. Then came Bosnia, Somalia, Kosovo, and then the mother of them all, it seems like 9/11, which changed the life for most of us, probably for all of us. 6 October 2001, the United States Air Force flies into Afghanistan, and they annihilate all the terrorist training camps. Ground forces are right behind them. Just 2 years later, Operation Iraqi Freedom starts. We find ourselves fighting 2 wars at the same time. I was never one of those command sergeant majors that sat in the talk and listened on the radio about what was going on with my troops. I wasn't raised like that. I was raised by Vietnam veterans, and they said in order to learn and get the respect of your troops, you need to be with them in the fight, not behind them, but with them in the fight. That stuck with me. And so as it happened on that day, February 16th, this was my second deployment to Afghanistan, we had put together a task force. There were some really bad guys on the mountain wreaking havoc on the villages. They come out at night and just start terrorizing these Afghan villages, and that really needed to stop. We flew the whole task force in with Chinooks. We landed at the base of the mountain. Everybody was jumping off. The Chinooks are hovering about 3 feet off the ground. We're running to our rally points, and all of a sudden this barrage of small arms fire starts coming at us, and then rockets are coming. And so it's this chaos, smoke and gunfire, and the helicopters are taken up, and they're kicking up all this debris and dirt, and you can't see. And so the task force gets dispersed in a very odd manner, not as we planned. And I found myself and 15 other soldiers very separated from the main task force. We had no place to go but up. So we started up the mountain. We were looking for anything that we could get behind to protect ourselves from the enemy that was pursuing us up this mountain. Sometimes there were rocks just this side, and we sit down. Within a minute or two, 3 of my guys were shot and killed, and 2 were wounded. So what we did was we started leapfrogging. 4 or 5 of us would sit down and do suppressive fire, while the other ones went up and found cover. And then they would fire the suppressive fire, and then we would go to where they were. And this is the way we were working ourselves up this mountain. I was the senior person of this 15-person unit, if you will. And I realized really quickly I had some problems. 1, we were low on ammo. 2, I was running out of real estate. I could see the peak of the mountain. So we decided right then and there, we band of brothers and sisters, if you will, and we said, we're going to go to the top of that mountain, and we're going to make a last stand, and we're going to fire every bullet we have. And if this is where it ends, this is where it ends. So we continue to go up the mountain, the enemy right behind us, pursuing us heavily. We get to the peak, and we're about to make that last stand. We're ready for it. We've decided it. We're gonna, cowboy up. This is what we're gonna do. And I heard it before I saw it, that beautiful sound of a Chinook helicopter. And then I caught it in the peripheral of my vision, and there it was. It was coming around. You know what was with it? 2 Apache helicopters. And all of a sudden, these Apache helicopters are raining hellfire missiles on the guys that have been chasing us up on the mountains and blowing on the smithereens. And then the Chinook comes around, and there's a pad just over the cliff of where we were making our last stand. It was probably left over from like the Soviet war. It was like a lookout point. And he sets his ass right down there on that pad, and he drops the tailgate. We loaded our wounded in there. We all got in there. I was the last one to step off the mountain, and I'm standing there as the tailgate is coming up. And I'm looking at this mountain, and I'm thinking to myself, I just spent a lifetime there. I'm not even sure all of me came off that mountain. It was a short flight back to the FOB. We landed. We got our wounded into the medevac helicopters. I went over to the helicopter, and I wanted to shake the hand of the pilot, and I said, thank you for coming to get us. And he said, Sergeant Major, we were monitoring you on the radio all morning. We were rooting for you and your guys. It was our honor to come and extract you off that mountaintop. And then he looked at me and he said, you done good, Sergeant Major. I turned to walk away, and this really young soldier comes running up to me in a very clean uniform, has 2 MREs in his hands, and he hands one to me and he says, Sergeant Major, it's lunchtime. What had seemed like a lifetime on that mountain had really only been about 3.5 hours. I asked the young soldier to sit with me and eat. Of course, his response was, yes, Sergeant Major. We sat down, we ate, we chatted about things that really didn't matter. lunch was over, I stood, reached out my hand to say thank you for the MRE, and I felt this strong, firm, young hand. And I looked into his face, and in his eyes, I saw optimism and I saw hope. As I dropped my hand down after the handshake, I kind of looked at myself and thought, oh my word, I'm covered in dirt and grime and mud and blood. This young soldier sat down and had lunch with me, never said a word about the way that I looked. I thought that was something that still kind of stays with me. That's the way it is down there. These moments like this happen time and time again. That's what it's like being at war.
And so we go back to the FOB after all 4 were killed, and we do a memorial ceremony, but we do all 4 at once, right? It's to save time and resources. We don't do 4 individual ceremonies for all the soldiers killed. We do it all at once. We get the night off before we head back out again. And that night, after we had some hot food and a shower, I kind of walked around where the guys live, and they were acting drunk, to be honest. So that's a little concern as leader, that alcohol is a court-martialable offense overseas, and there's no place to get it, right? So I pulled aside one of the good NCOs, and I say, Sergeant Ski, what's going on here, man? And he said, well, sir, the guys are obviously destroyed, and they found some Listerine, and they all drank a bottle of Listerine, and they're shit-faced off of it. I probably should have told somebody, reported it, I turned them in, I don't know. These are my guys, and they had just buried their brothers. And to be honest, I kind of want to drink some Listerine too. But you don't. You go back out, and over the next several months, it was the same thing. These incredible operations tempo, 6 days on, 1 day off. More high-value targets and IEDs and gunfights every day, all day. Copenhagen and cigarettes and swearing. But you're with your guys, so you make it through. So one of our days in, we go back to that trailer. I saw Sardella's crying, and I checked my email, and I was, we're probably a month from going home, 3 weeks, and we're all pretty excited after a pretty terrible year. And I was planning on going to South America with my best friend Dave. He wanted to climb the Patagonias and look at rocks and water. I was less Thoreau-like. I just wanted to sit on the beach and drink Caprianas in Rio. So I got an email from his mom, and I thought it was odd. Why is she, maybe she's talking about our vacation that we're going to take, or Dave and I were going to live together when we got back to Colleen. But I opened the email, and all it said was, Dear Garrett, we regret to inform you our son David has been killed in action. Fondly, Helen. I never forget, it was one sentence. I was like, this is a pretty cold, formulaic letter. This is either a spam from a Nigerian king who wants my social security number, or this isn't real. So I sat there for a few minutes. And I walked over to the Tactical Operations Center and checked the reporting. It had happened. An engineer, brand new first lieutenant, had been killed in action on his last patrol. Showing the new guys when you replace someone, you spend some time together and showing them what to do. And he said, I'll go out one more time to make sure you have it, to make sure you know what you're doing. He was on a riot clearance team, and he was killed his last day. And I was slated to go home in a couple weeks, so my squadron commander let me fly home a couple weeks early on an earlier Chalk and Advon flight. And so I landed back in Killeen, Texas, and that's my first time ever coming home after deployment. And you get on a bus and they line you up and you go to the gym. It's the Iron Horse gym back when it was at Fort Hood, and you march in and everyone's dressed up. All the wives are dressed up like they're going on a date, and all the husbands are in suits, and the kids have had showers and they're dressed up even though it's 1 o'clock in the morning. And there's Toby Keith blaring and smoke machines and confetti and a huge American flag, and it's a pretty joyous occasion. And then they all fall out and just, husband and wife run to each other and embrace, and kids start crying. I mean, it's a pretty emotional moment. I didn't have anyone there. My parents were there. I had a buddy of mine there from high school, and I went out to the parking lot and drank some scotch with my dad, and then drove to my friend Dave's funeral in Houston, Texas. So next morning we wake up, I put on my dress blues, which I'd never had on before because I'd never really had the occasion to wear them. And I had some new shiny medals and, V devices and things like that. And we're driving to his funeral, which is kind of nice to go to, because normally you don't get to go to your people's funeral in the States. You're already downrange. You go to a 30-minute memorial. But we're driving to the church, and before we get there, there's this group of people from a church in Kansas that are protesting. God hates soldiers. Thank God for IEDs. Like, he deserved to die. So about 6 days ago, I'd been literally in gunfights and killing people, and I got medals for it. And now these people are making fun of, ridiculing my dead best friend, a guy who taught Sunday school, who as a cadet at West Point was asked to be a teacher when he came back in 6 years. He was that good. And I was white knuckling the dashboard, and I told my buddy, hey, pull over, I got to talk to these guys. And I probably wasn't going to talk, to be honest. I had this violence welling up that I just had been doing for a year 6 days ago, and my buddy kept driving, So instead of going to the Patagonia, I just kind of went to the Bahamas by myself, and I sat on a beach, and I drank a lot of rum and smoked a lot of Cuban cigars and didn't really talk to anybody for a couple of weeks. And, hey, it's time to go back again. So I got back to the Colleen, and then I was supposed to be an assistant operations officer, a staff guy. You make op orders, you make slideshows, and my squadron commander said, Garrett, you're not the most organized guy I know. You're not too good at PowerPoint. Can't argue, sir. But the Iraqis seem to like you. You like cheap cigarettes and tea, and you seem to enjoy running around and fighting and talking to people. I said, you can't argue either, sir. So he said, I need you to be in charge of a military advisor team. It's really a major's job, and I'm a pre-command captain, so it's kind of a big deal for me. And I break out of the office. I'm back out in an outpost with my guys and vehicles and purpose, and I'm out operating, and that's kind of the happy place to be for me. And it, dare I say, was a pretty enjoyable year, right? Much less violent. I'm going to meetings with key leaders and making influence on policy. And we secured the first ever in the history of Iraq provincial elections. We had 22 polling sites. Nothing happened without a hitch. And it was a great feeling. I could tell myself that at least that first year and all those people dying was worth it. It's kind of nice here now. And so, but after all that, I said, hey, I'm gonna get out of the Army. I've done my, I think, 6 years at that point, and I got a job at the State Department. I'm going to wear suits and drink cocktails at the French Embassy in Paris and to kind of just live the good life. So I turned in my paperwork to get out, and a few months later, my squadron commander says, Garrett, come into my office. He lived in this nice Iraqi house. I said, Garrett, I threw away the paperwork he turned in to get out. I said, sir, I'm not sure that's legal. You can't really do that. But he knew people, and he knew what he was doing. So I said, Garrett, I'll give you command of Ian Weichel's troop, because I had been a platoon leader, and he'd been my guy. I said, sir, you're kind of manipulating me a little bit. You're pulling the heartstrings. I said, I know. I said, secondly, you're going to move your unit from Killeen, Texas to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and be stationed at Fort Carson. Fort Carson is infinitely nicer than Killeen. Vale, Breckenridge, an hour away. It's a nice town, I said, sir, I don't know. It's a lot. It's tempting. He said, third, you will be the first mechanized unit in Afghanistan. You will command in combat. And as a leader, to be offered that and all those things, you can't say no. So after I turned down a $30,000 bonus because I was getting out, I stayed in. And so we trained for a year, JROTC, we go to Afghanistan, and I'm a command of a cavalry troop, about 100 guys and snipers and my own mortar systems. It's a pretty great feeling. And that year in Afghanistan was, to this point, probably personally and professionally, the highlight of my life, where, I'm building hospitals and directing USAID dollars. I'm building schools. We're getting in these ridge-to-ridge fights and dropping bombs. We're clearing poppy fields. Taliban commanders are surrendering to me, a 31-year-old kid. I'm in charge of 3 districts in Afghanistan, and I feel pretty good about life, that I'm doing something important. So one of the big things we did towards the end, the Taliban capital of this province out west in Baghdad was a stronghold. The Taliban commanders lived there, and no government forces had ever been there since the Russians. So the only maps we had, they were all in Cyrillic. So we assembled this coalition. We've got 140 Afghan soldiers, 50 or 60 Afghan police, and I had drank enough tea and smoked enough hookah and done enough naswar with the tribes. We had about 200 quasi-legal militiamen on motorcycles with AKs. So we pull out, and we've got 400 guys. I'm, again, some 30-year-old captain, and we go to a cave in the river valley. And it's about a 6-day fight. I dropped 10 JDAMs in one night. We're Winchester B1s, directed fires of F-18s, F-16s. I mean, it's kind of fun, to be honest, right? I mean, you've got all this in your hand, Mike. Direct and indirect fires, direct fires. We take over the Taliban commander's house, and there's this flag from Texas, the Battle of Gonzales flag. It's just got a black cannon on it. It says, come and take it. So we plant it on the top of the house of the Taliban commander, and I'm on the rooftop, and I've got a ball cap on. I'm directing B-1 bombers and fast movers to drop with my JTACs, and I got to level with you. At this point, I'm a cocky little shit, right? we've just done all this stuff. I feel pretty important about myself. We command this river valley, right? And there's this moment, a guy hands me a cup of coffee because I kind of drink it incessantly, and it was just, I remember thinking this flash of, I'm 31 years old. I will never be this important again in my life. I will never matter this much again in my life. In the middle of all this, and it was pretty crushing, you know?
When I came back from deployment, my family didn't quite understand why I was so tense. There would be moments in the middle of the night I would wake up looking for my weapon, even though I knew it wasn't there. My unit, we didn't get hit as much. I think we got hit an average of 6 times, and 3 out of those 6 is when they actually hit inside our cob. And then 45 minutes out from us, Shank got hit a minimum of 200 times, and they were there for like 230 days. There was this one time my cousin came to visit me in Houston, and Apple had this alarm that sounded similar to the incoming alarm. And we were sleeping, and all of a sudden I hear it, and I jump up. And she's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I'm just like, you're going to need to change that alarm because this isn't going to work. I then decided that I was going to get out the military. I had 2 weeks from out processing to my first day of school, so I didn't really process the transition out the military. I was in one of my classes, and I don't really remember how age was brought up, but when they found out I was 23, one of my classmates go, "Oh my God, you're old." I'm kind of sitting there like, I don't think I'm that old. I served with 18 and 19-year-olds. And then that's when I kind of realized there was a difference from being in and being out.
The thought of retiring never even crossed my mind. Even though I had 27 years in the military, we were still at war. I still wanted to fight with my soldiers. So that thought was nowhere in my mind. So it just happened to be on this certain day that I was out visiting one of my FOBs, checking on my troops. And all of a sudden, mortar fire starts coming in like rain. I mean, just peppering the inside of our FOB. And I'm yelling at the soldiers at the top of my lungs, "Get in the bunkers! Get in the bunkers!" And then a round lands about 10 feet from me, throws me into a cement bunker wall, which resulted in a pretty traumatic brain injury. I'm deaf. So later, I woke up in Lonsdale Army Medical Center. So a young doctor standing next to my bed, and he had a white erase board and was writing something on it, and he held it in front of my face, and it said, "You're deaf." I took it and erased and wrote on there, "Forever." And just took the marker under "forever" and wrote "yes." It wasn't so much my physical wounds or even my emotional or mental wounds that really were the hardest part of coming back. What really broke my heart, almost like a sucking chest wound feeling, almost rendered me hopeless, was the fact that I didn't get to retire on my terms. I'd been robbed of that. That was literally ripped from me, that decision. That someone else got to make that decision and I didn't get to make it. And that was quite a hurdle for me.
So I'm back, and I tried to quit the Army again. And they said, "You're going to be aide-de-camp to the commanding general." I said, "I'm not shining anybody's shoes. I don't even know what that means. What's an aide?" And so I became the aide to the 4th Infantry Division commander, a guy named Joe Anderson. I'd say I never learned so much about leadership from that guy that I did in that 1 year. He, to this day, is like a father to me. But I do get out The State Department didn't work out. I mishandled a little classified information overseas. They don't like that too much. So I ended up in California, and my life is at this intersection of being Forrest Gump and Slumdog Millionaire, where I don't know what I'm doing, and things just kind of happen. They tend to work out. And so I find myself selling medical devices, back screws and rods and connectors to neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons in Beverly Hills, California. And I live in Hermosa Beach on the water, right on the ocean, with this brotastic frat house with a hot tub on the roof and overlooking the ocean, and it's worthy of MTV Cribs, right? Fireplace, and I don't know how I ended up there. And I'm taking surgeons to these nice restaurants on the expense account, and in return for war stories and entertainment, they were now giving me their business, and seemed like a good deal. But I was really trying to figure out why I wasn't happy, right? I've got this sweet house and this sweet job that if you stay, you can make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it's time to make money. I've done a decade in the Army, deployed a lot, but I didn't really have any friends, right? I had drinking buddies, but that's not a friend. No one could understand my experiences or connect to me. So I get a call from a guy named Joe Quinn. He said, "Garrett, do you ever think about working at a nonprofit?" And I said, "Joe, I love you, but I ate ramen noodles in college. I ain't doing it again." He said, "All right, fair enough. Go to this thing out in LA. It's called Team Red, White, and Blue, and just hang out, go for a run and do a cross workout." I'm like, "All right, I like you. We'll see what happens." So I did go, right? And I met folks and not necessarily even talked about what I did or where I'd been, but there was an Army guy. We made fun of the Navy guys, and it was fun. And I kind of got it. I was missing community and camaraderie, and I was missing service and leadership and all these things. So I called Joe back and I said, "Joe, I'll try it out for a couple months." So I went into my boss's office, who gave me this great job in med device, and it was about 3 PM in Beverly Hills, and I made him an old fashioned. I said, "Sir, it's not you, it's me. We got to break up. It's not going to work out." And I told him why, everything I just said, and he said, "Garrett, I was going to offer you a lot of money to stay, and after that speech, I'm not going to do it." And I said, "Wait, how much?" And so I got in my Jeep and I drove from Los Angeles to Atlanta, and it probably the best decision I've ever made.
Lots of people ask me, "Sergeant Major, did you see progress? Were all of these conflicts and wars, were they for naught?" And I say, no. And some of them are very tangible. If you think about Grenada, we gave them independence. That is their Independence Day, just like 4th of July for us. It's 25 October. That's how they celebrated. That was a good thing. Same thing with Panama. We ousted a very nasty dictator and restored their country back to the way that it should have been. Those were obvious things that you could see and almost measure. But sometimes it wasn't quite that clear what the good nugget was that you could pull out of something, because there was so much sacrifice that went along with these things. But if it wasn't obvious, you had to find it for yourself. You had to walk away thinking that good did happen there, in spite of the tragedies and the sacrifices and the deaths of your buddies. Something good did happen there. Because if you didn't do that, your heart would literally break. You can't fight with a broken heart, much less live. So, the optimistic side of me, says good things did happen. My last tour in Afghanistan, I saw progress from the very beginning when I first went in 2001 until my last one. When the Taliban first went into Afghanistan, one of the first things they did was make all the women quit their jobs, pulled all the girls out of the schools, incorporated all kinds of rules and regulations, but the one thing they really did that was so strategic and so horrific was they forbid the flying of the kites, which was the national pastime, the sport in Afghanistan. It'd be like someone coming to America and saying, you can never play another football game again. There'll be no more stadiums filled with fans, and how fun that is for all of us. It was so devastating to the people that it broke their spirit and it almost rendered them hopeless. By the last tour, when I was in Afghanistan, the women were back to work. Some of them even owned their own businesses. And I remember seeing the little girls lined up in their little uniforms, and they were going to school. I'll never forget seeing the kites in the sky again. If you were to ask an Afghan citizen what the sound of freedom sounds like to them, you know what they would say? The sound of freedom to us, they would say, is the sound of a kite fluttering in the sky. And I can tell you today that those kites are still flying in Afghanistan.
So I never really kind of sat down and pondered all the feelings, you know? Not until I really started working at Team Roy and Blue and doing this with the Telling Project. You just kind of, you're a guy, it's the Army, good experiences, you move on. But I remember read an article a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, in the New York Times by a guy named Phil Clay. And he wrote that combat veterans don't watch war movies. Their life was a war movie, right? Their life was an action movie. And they like to watch romantic comedies. I relate that to a lot. My favorite movie is Love Actually, right? And even downrange, my little hut on the side of a mountain, I had this need to kind of, when we came back and we got out of real gunfights, right? My guys would go play Call of Duty, like a video game about gunfights. I'm like, guys, that's probably not real healthy. I'm no doctor. But I'd go watch The Notebook or read novels and fiction. And I ordered these prints of art and put on the walls. And to something I've never really done before, I just kind of had this urge. I needed to balance the savagery and the fighting and the killing with art and beauty and, creating something versus destroying something. And I think that's why even now I'm kind of, quasi-normal, I guess. I don't know. And to be able to communicate, right? And I think I also realized that on that rooftop in Afghanistan, that one fleeting moment where I was so devastated that I was wrong, leading in combat for 3 years and being in charge of folks and these epic things where you're a governor of 3 districts and the Afghans are giving you rugs and you're presiding over ceremonies of hundreds of people surrendering. It seems important at the time, and it is, obviously, but I'm 35 now, and I've got, I hope if I eat right and keep exercising, maybe another 60 years of life to live. So I've got a lot left to give, right? I've got a lot more to do here. Garrett, Cathcart, U.S. Army.
Sidney, Covington, U.S. Army.
Gretchen Evans, U.S. Army.
That's it. Yeah.